All right. Okay. Well, happy Wednesday. It's October 30th. Hope your weeks are going well. We are still talking about pandas. So we introduced pandas as kind of the module that we load into Python to handle data frames. And I want to spend some time showing you how to do summaries with pandas. So we're going to use a couple of functions here, group by and pivot, and this will kind of show us, how do you do some data manipulation in pandas here. Okay, so that's what we'll take a look at. Okay, so we'll start off. Import pandas, import NumPy. And so I think this will run. Now one thing to know, right, is that everything in Python, the landscape gets updated very frequently. So right now my pandas version is 2.2.3. Probably in a couple of years, like these notes are going to be outdated because they're going to have updated stuff, and some of these things will have been deprecated, and they'll have updated methods for doing this and that. So just keep that in mind. Get used to reading documentation and seeing like, okay, so the concepts of like what you need to do in your head, that's going to remain the same, but perhaps the syntax or the commands you use will change a little bit. All right. A lot of what we do in pandas regarding summary tables and group by and pivoting and things like that depends on having a hierarchical index. So we're already familiar with the index in pandas, okay? But so far our index has just been kind of maybe a sequence of integers, 0, 1, 2, 3, our range index, or maybe just some letters or words, some strings or something like that. You can actually create an index that is a matrix, okay? And if you do that, we call that a multi-index or a hierarchical index. And so here I've got an array. I've just got these numbers, but I've attached a matrix for my index. So it's a two-dimensional matrix. I've got how many rows? I've got 9 rows and 2 columns. Okay. The first column is AAA, BBB, CCC. Now when it prints it out, it just says A, and it doesn't repeat the A and the A. But this is A4, A5, A6, and then the next is B4, B5, B6, and then C4, C5, C6. So it's a column of A's, B's, and C's. And then I got 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so if I said, hey, what is the index on this series here? So the series is just these numbers here. But if I just say, hey, what's the index? The index itself is kind of this two-dimensional structure. I guess it's technically it says it's a multi-index. Okay, and it's I guess technically a bunch of tuples: A4, A5, A6, B4, B5, B6, C4, C5, C6. Okay. But it's kind of this two-dimensional structure. We've got basically a column of A's and B's and C's and a column of 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. You can subset using the multi-index, and you can just say, hey, I want the rows corresponding to B. Okay? And so when you do that, notice it just kind of pulls this section out where I've got B4, B5, B6. And because it's this multi-index, what I pull out also contains the index values 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I get those values 8, 10, and 12, but it also extracts the index of this thing. Okay, and that index is 4, 5, 6. You can select also kind of based on the second level index. So you can say, hey, I want everything where I've got a 5 at the second level. Okay, and you do you can do this. Okay, you're going to select via the inner index. You're going to basically say I want A through B, and I want the where everything's a 5. Okay, so we get basically the A5, the B5, and the C5. Okay, and so because everything has a 5, the corresponding index will just be ABC. We have 5, 10, 15. Okay. The type on these things, these are both, this is a series. If you say, hey, what is the index on this? It's just going to be a similar plain old one-dimensional index, not a multi-index, just the index ABC on this thing. Okay. Here, here's my data here. Again, I got this multi-index. If you have a multi-index, you can take that series and you can unstack it. Okay. This is unstacked. This is kind of, if you're familiar with R's dplyr tools, there is a pivot wider or a spread thing, and it basically, look what it has done. It has taken, we have A4, A5, A6, and it's going to take those values, the 4, 5, 6, and make them columns. It's going to basically take the A4, 5, and 6 and just kind of pivot them. All right, so we have A4, A5, A6 going across the row, and then we have B4, B5, B6 going across the row, and then C4, C5, C6 going across the row, right? So 8, 10, 12, 12, 15, 18. Okay. Now, after you unstack this, what is the index? The index is just going to be ABC. It's no longer a multi-index. And what is the shape of this after you've unstacked? It's 3 by 3. Okay, 3 rows, ABC, 3 columns, 4, 5, 6. If you unstack something, you can stack it back up. All right, so this is kind of silly, but stack and unstack are inverse operations. So if you take the thing, you unstack and you stack it, you'll get back kind of the original data. With the multi-index, we have A4, A5, A6, B4, B5, B6 as my index. You can actually take those things and you can swap the levels. Okay, and if you do that, now you get 4A, 5A, 6A, 4B, 5B, 6B, 4C, 5C, 6C. Okay, so we've basically swapped kind of the columns, column 1 and column 2, in the index here. Okay, and similarly, we can, once we've swapped the levels, I can say, hey, just give me where the inner index is A, okay, and we'll get basically the 4, 5, 6, okay. When you swap the level, it preserves the original order, but you might say, well, after I've swapped the level, I want to sort on this new index. So you can say swap level dot sort index. Can you do that? And now we get 4A, 4B, 4C, 5A, 5B, 5C, and 6A, 6B, 6C. Okay, so we get, so it has swapped the levels and it has sorted them. First on the outer index and then on the inner. Okay, again, all of these things, they don't affect the original data itself. The original data series still has A on the outer index and the 4, 5, 6 on the inner index. Okay. What would happen if I swap the levels and I unstack? Okay. If I swap the levels, then my outer index will be 4, 5, 6. So my rows will be labeled 4, 5, 6. The inner index will be the A's, B's, and C's. And if I unstack them, they will become the columns. So I'm going to get rows with index 4, 5, 6 and the columns A, B, C. So these are basically transposes. If I take the original thing and I unstack, here I have my rows A, B, C and the columns 4, 5, 6, and basically I've kind of transposed these things. Okay, so if I unstack and then I transpose, I pretty much get the same thing. But that's what we have there. Okay. So here's the series with my multi-index. If I call sum on the entire series, it just sums the whole thing. It takes all of these numbers, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 12, 15, 18, adds them all up. You get one value, 90. Okay? But you can call sum based on different levels of the index. Okay, so I can say take my data, group by index level 0. So we're going to group the A's together, the B's together, and the C's together, and we'll get those values. So I can say group level 0 and call dot sum. Okay, and we'll say, okay, if you take the A's 4, 5, 6, add them together, you'll get 15. If you take the B's, add them together, 8, 10, 12, you'll get 30. And the C's, 12, 15, 18, you'll get 45. Okay. You can say group by level 1. Level 1 is the inner index. So we'll say group the 4s, group the 5s, group the 6s. Okay. If you group the 4s together, you'll basically do the 4, 8, and 12 and get 24. For the 5s, you'll do 5, 10, and 15, and you'll get 30. And then you'll get 6, 12, and 18, and you'll get 36. So you can group by level 0 or level 1. So these are kind of, asking pandas to group our data and sum them up accordingly. Okay, let me give you your first view quiz answer, which is the letter C. C as in cat. C as in cat. Okay, here is just a toy little, tiny little data frame, okay? And I have row, alpha and beta, okay? And we're gonna call that letter, the name for the rows. And then I've got the columns. Columns are 1, 2, and 3, okay? And the values are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? And here you can give labels to, like, what are your row names? Okay, that's my index. My index is alpha and beta, and I said the name is letter. And then the column names are 1, 2, 3, and the name corresponding to the columns are called numbers. All right, I'm gonna take this data frame and I'm gonna stack them, okay? And so here we're gonna form a multi-index, okay? And it's going to use the rows as kind of our top level thing, right? So we have letter, alpha, and then it takes the columns, and that's going to be our second level index, okay, in the multi-index. So now we have letter, alpha, and number 1, 2, 3. So I got alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. And the values have been stacked, okay? Again, stack and unstack are inverse operations. So if I do data.stack followed by .unstack, we kind of get back the original data that I have. All right. If you, when you call unstack, all right, so here's data.stack. This is what we have. You can unstack based on however you want. Now, when you call unstack, the default is it unstacks the inner the inner index, okay, the number. But here I can say unstack 0, and so now the outer index, the alpha and the beta, will get unstacked into columns alpha and beta. So these are kind of transposes of each other. You can also specify unstack, and you can name if your index has name values. Like we do here, letter and number, you can say unstack the letter. Okay, you can unstack the number. Okay, so these are things that you can do regarding unstacking. Okay, let me just show you a couple more series. Okay, so here I've got series 1. Series 1 is just the values 1, 2, 3, and the index is A, B, C, D. And then I've got a second series, series 2, and the index is C, D, E, and the values are 4, 5, 6. And here I'm going to concatenate these two series together, okay? But I'm going to also provide this argument keys 1 and 2. And when I do that, it creates a multi-index, okay? When I concatenate, when I basically have one series and another series, and I'm joining them together, okay? But rather than joining them like as, you know, column 1 and column 2, here I'm joining them on top of each other. So I got rows, A, B, C, D, and another set of rows, C, D, E, but I'm providing this argument keys, and so series 1, S1, will get in the multi-index will be titled 1, okay, so I got 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and then the values here for CDE, I'll get 2, 2C, 2D, 2E. So this is what my series looks like right now. I got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I've got 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 2C, 2D, 2E. Okay, what is going to happen if I call data.unstack, data2.unstack? So it's going to take this A, B, C, D, C, D, E, and it's going to unstack them into columns. Okay, and it's going to do its best to match things up, but it's going to find that there's no 2A or 2B, and so those are going to introduce NANDs. Okay, it's also going to find that there's no 1E, so it's also going to introduce a NAND there. Okay, so that's what we end up getting. Okay, so we get columns A, B, C, D, and E, and it has matched everything up accordingly. 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and so on and so forth, but for 1E we have a NAND. Similarly, we have a NAND for 2A and 2B. Okay, so that's what we have there. If I unstack it and I stack it back up, okay, that thing will filter out the missing values because these missing values were just introduced by the unstacking process. Okay, if the NANDs were there as part of actual values that were stored in there, it would not filter those out. But it's just the NANDs that were kind of introduced as part of the unstacking process will end up getting filtered out there. Okay, does that kind of make sense, how these NANDs appear? And then whenever you have NANDs, if you have integers, our thing started off as integers, but we can see now we have decimal values, because NANDs are always floating point values, right? So here, this is one case where unstack.stack doesn't produce the same thing, okay? So they're inverse operations. Normally we think of it as undoing the others, and it does, but there is a subtle difference. These are integers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and these are floats, 0.0, 1.0, 2.0, and so on and so forth. And that's because when you unstack, you introduce NANDs. When you introduce NANDs, it's going to upcast integers into floats. All right, let's keep going. We're going to do a little bit of data wrangling. I'm going to load up this CSV file called macro data. This is a generated, it says US macroeconomic data. I don't know how, it says compiled by this. Data are from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, except unemployment rate, which comes from National Bureau of Labor Statistics. I don't know, it goes from 1959 to 2009. So I guess 50 years of data. It's already, 2009 is what, 15 years ago already? Okay. So, but anyway, we'll take a look at this. We'll load this up. We'll just do pandas.read_CSV. We'll load in macrodata.csv. We'll go ahead and just take a look. We got 203 values in each column. We've got, and everything looks like a float. We have year, quarter, real GDP, real something, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just go ahead and take a look at the headings, the first few rows, the first 5 rows. Okay. And so we see a few things. Year is 1959, but it's getting loaded in as a float. So we get 1959.0, and then the quarter, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, also gets read in as a float. So we get 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. These other things all look like they should be floats. So real GDP, something, I don't know what these, I was just on the site, but okay. Personal consumption, private domestic investment, and so on and so forth. And it marks all of these things: inflation rate, real interest rate, these different values. Okay, one thing we can try to do is we can create a period index, okay? So we have the period index, and this is used for, where did it go? We have the date time index, the period index. And this can be used to create periods from from fields and things like that. Okay, so we can use this to create period index. So the examples is pandas.periodindex.from fields, and we're going to specify the years and the quarters and things like that. So in our case, we're going to take the year, right? We're going to take the column data.year, and we're going to take the column data.quarter, and we're going to make periods out of this. Okay, so this is we're going to say I want to look at some time periods, and so so pandas will interpret this and say, okay, we're talking about the first quarter, okay, because I said quarter, so we're going to get 1959 quarter 1, 1959 quarter 2, 1959 quarter 3. So you can tell pandas that like these values here, these correspond to the year, and these values here correspond to the quarter. And it understands like these kind of time periods. And so you can say, month 1, month 2, so on and so forth. You can also specify like first quarter and so on and so forth. Here I'm going to, we have all of these columns here, and I just kind of want to subset down to just these 3 columns. Real GDP, inflation, unemployment, okay? And we'll do that. And I'm going to just kind of re-index to kind of conform our data to these columns I've specified. And so when I do that, now I just have these the columns that I've named, okay? So basically I've subset it just to those columns. Real GDP, inflation, unemployment. We can take our periods, 1959 Q1, and we can turn them into dates. So there is a function that you can do with a period index, okay? And we can say .to timestamp, okay? And so we can put in at the start date, so 1959 quarter 1, the start date is January 1st, 1959, okay? 1959 quarter 2 is 1959 April 1, okay? Quarter 3 is July 1. You can also put, instead of start, you can put an end. 1959 quarter 1, the end of that quarter is March 31st at 11:59, okay? The end of the second quarter is June 30th at 11:59. And the end of the third quarter is September 30th, 11:59, okay? So that's what you can do. You can, and that's, to timestamp. Over here, it just kind of gives us the starting date, July 1, October 1st, so on and so forth. Okay, and so we have all of these timestamps there. Right now, the index, after I've conformed the data to this, okay, our index is just these integers 0 through 202. And so we're going to just kind of take this timestamp, this date index, and we're just going to replace it. Okay, I'm going to just do data.index, and I'm just going to replace this. So I'm not re-indexing anything, I'm just replacing the old index from the range index to this. And so now my data looks like this. Okay, I've got the index, which is going to be all of these dates: 1959 January 1st, 1959 April 1, July 1, October 1, 1960 January 1, so on and so forth, and we have these numbers. Okay. Here I can stack them. Okay, I can take these real GDP, inflation, unemployment, and I can stack them. And so now I get this series. I get 1959 January 1, real GDP, this number, inflation, this number, unemployment, this number. Okay, 1959 April 1, GDP this, inflation this number, unemployment this number, so on and so forth. We can do all of that. So that will create a series. When you have a series, so we have this multi-index. One thing you can also do is you can call reset index. If you reset the index, it's going to take all of these things and just kind of turn them into, it's going to turn the whole thing into a data frame. And so we had this multi-index. These are the values. This is the index, inner level and the index outer level. And here it just says we're going to kind of reset the index. And when you do that, now we have an index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, a range index. And all of these things that used to be structured like this get structured into a data frame. Now, it just will fill in column names because we don't actually have a column name here or a index name here. So it just says, well, this was level 0 of the multi-index, so it calls it level 0. And then here it says there was no column name for this, so it's just going to call it column 0. So, so in that case, we probably want to rename these columns. The index here is just a range index, starts at 0. Now, because we have 3 values for each date, okay, this thing is 3 times taller, so rather than having 203 rows, 1 row for 1959, January 1, and 1 row for 1959, April 1, rather than having 1 row for each date, we now have 3 rows for each date, okay? But I have a row for real GDP, inflation, unemployment, so on and so forth. So it's 3 times longer, so my end is 609. So to kind of fix this, I'm going to just rename my column from level 0 to date. We're going to call this thing 0 to value, okay? And I'm going to call this my data in long form, okay? So my data in long form now looks like this. So it's pretty much, it's the same data, but I've just reshaped it into long form. So we're basically kind of, rotating or pivoting our data so that we have, 609 rows. Our data is now in long form, okay? If I say, hey, what's the shape of this? It's going to say 609 by 3. If I try to unstack this, it's not going to work, okay? If I try to unstack, it just kind of gets confused. It produces, the length is now 1,827. It just has it basically has kind of stacked everything or unstacked them all into just one giant series. I got a whole bunch of 1959 01s, 1959 04s. That becomes just kind of one thing. So it ends up actually kind of creating a big multi-index here. So it doesn't quite work the way we want because unstack and stack are powered by a multi-index. And here we don't have a multi-index. The index is just a range index. But I've got 3 columns, a column for date, item, and value. But what we can do is we can call pivot. All right? And so with pivot, if you have data in long form, you can pivot it back into wide form. So here, we're going to say, I want to take index as date, the columns are the items, the values are the value, okay? So we're kind of undoing the work that we did to create our data in long form, but sometimes you have data in long form and you need to pivot into wide form. Sometimes you have data in wide form and you need to pivot in long form, okay? So here, I'm going to take my long data and I'm pivoting it, okay? And so, the index is my date, and then the items become the columns, and I've got the column for inflation, column for real GDP, column for unemployment. So this looks a lot like what we had up here, okay? Except this is in the order is real GDP, inflation, unemployment, and down here these got put in alphabetical order, okay? But it's the same columns, right? Same data. So sometimes you have to go from long data to wide data, sometimes from wide data into long data. Okay. If here, when I did pivot, I said index, the index that I want when I widen my data, okay, is going to be the date, and the columns will come from the item. Now, if I swap those around and I say the index will be the item, okay, now I'm going to have 3 rows, 1 row for inflation, 1 row for real GDP, 1 row for unemployment. I can specify the columns to the date, okay, and I'll have a column for January 1, 1959, a column for April 1, 1959, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now the data is really wide, okay, but I have 3 rows and 203 columns. So this is kind of in this wide form. So it's these are kind of like transposes of each other, but we get these by specifying what's going to become our column and what's going to become our index when we pivot our data. Okay, all of these things return new objects, don't affect the actual original data. Okay, the original data, as I've kind of left it off after I set it to after I conformed everything and created a new index, this remains as it is. All right, let me give you your second answer. Second answer today is D. D as in dog. D. Okay, a big important feature is this group by, okay, in Pandas. So here I'm going to show you a data frame where I've got a multi-index, okay, or not multi-index, I've just got a bunch of these columns here, okay, but we can, and different values, and we can kind of use these values to create summary statistics. So I've got key 1, A's and B's, key 2, 1s and 2s, and values, okay, data 1, data 2. So these are just kind of arbitrary things. This is just a little little data set, just so you can kind of see what happens. Okay, so you can take this data that we have here, okay, my data frame, okay, and I'm going to say, hey, I want just data 1, but I want to group it by key 1. Okay, so column data 1 is what, 5, 11, 12, 8, and 9. And I want to group by key 1, which is AABBAA, or AABBA, okay? And again, Pandas and Python is lazy, so when you do this, it's just going to say, okay, I understand that you want me to group this, but you haven't really asked me to do anything, so I haven't done anything yet. Okay, so I'm going to say, all right, give me this grouped data, but calculate the mean, okay? And so now it's going to say, all right, for this column, data 1, the mean of A is going to be the mean of 5, 11, and 9, right? So if you look at key 1, we got A, and A. 5, 11, and 9 add up to 25. 25 over 3 is 8.33. For key 2, or key 1, which is in letter B, it's going to give me the mean of 12 and 8, and it's going to give you a 10. Okay. So you can ask for things like the mean, you can ask for things like the sum, okay, min, max, median, things, all kinds of summary values, okay, after you do a group by. So, and you can do this in one line as well. You don't have to create the group. So you can do df dot data one dot group by, and you can say we want to group by key one, and you can say I want the mean. You'll get the same thing. All right. If you have a mix of, say, numeric and categorical data, you can say I want numeric only equals true. And if you don't specify anything, so here, back here I said I want data frame of data one, or just look at data one and group by. If you don't, it's gonna do it for the entire data frame. Okay, it'll give you the mean for both columns, data one and data two, looking only just at the numeric columns. Okay, if I don't specify numeric only, it'll get confused, right? It'll say like, well, you're asking me to calculate the mean of also this column, key one and key two, or key two. We're grouping by key one, so it can't calculate the mean. But you can just say, hey, just the numeric columns, give me the mean, okay? Or give me, the median, the min, whatever you want. The sum. And that has no problem. You can also group by multiple values or multiple columns. So I can say, hey, group by key one and key two. Okay. And it's going to look for all of the unique combinations of key one and key two. And we can say, hey, calculate the mean there. Okay. For mean here, I don't have to specify numeric only equals true, because key one and key two, because I've put them in the group by, it's not going to try to calculate the mean for those columns here. And everything that remains is just numeric only. So I don't have to specify numeric only, because after I've taken into account key one and key two, I don't have any categorical values. Okay, so here it says for A1, we're going to take the mean of 5 and 9, which is 7, okay? And then everything else is just unique values, right? A1, so A2 is 11, and B1 is 12, and B2 is 8, and so on and so forth, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, this is for data 1. And if you don't specify that if you don't specify the entire thing, it'll do it for the entire data frame, okay? Data 1 and data 2, it'll give you the mean of data 1 and data 2. So these are for A2, B1, and B2, it's just these things, just these values here. It's 11, 5, 12, 15, 18, 8, and 0, because there's no kind of repeats. But here for A1, it does calculate the mean of 5 and 9 and the mean of 11 and 16. Right here. Perhaps sum is easier to see. Do counts. Okay, we can do counts, and we just have one of each, and here we have 2. With a multi-index, you can unstack them, okay? And so here I've got key 1, key 2, and I can unstack them as well, and I get all of this. So you have all of that you can do. Okay. Again, here's our data frame. So there's kind of a lot that you can do with this kind of group by. And so this is just kind of a small little toy data set, but you could imagine a larger data set where you have a categorical variable and you want to kind of group by them or summarize them and things like that. Okay. You can also take just completely different data frames, right? And then just kind of match them up. So here I have a states array and a array for years. So states, I've got California, Ohio, and California. It says Ohio, California, California, Ohio, Ohio. Okay? and the years are 2005, 2005, 2006, 2005, 2006. And here I can just kind of take that column data 1, I can say df data 1, and then just group by these arrays, states and years. Okay, and so it's going to try to match up. The Ohio is going to get matched up with the 5 and the 8 and the 9. Okay, and then so for Ohio 2005, it'll do. I guess the Ohio 2005 is the first one, which is 5. And then Ohio 2005 is the second to last one, which corresponds to 8. So it's going to give us the mean of 5 and 8. So Ohio 2005 will be 6.5. California 2005 will be that second value, 11. California 2006 will be that third value, 12. And then Ohio 2006 will be the last value, 9. So you can just kind of take some arbitrary series that's not actually in the data frame, and it will align them order by order and do that. Now, if you provide something that's of a different length, okay, so if I do Ohio again here, then it's going to run into a problem. Okay, it's going to say the grouper and access must be of the same length because here it's not, right? I got something that's too many. Okay, and if you put in something else, then as long as it's the same length, it'll work. And so here I've got Ohio 2005. We don't have an Ohio 2006, but we have something for Texas 2006, and so on and so forth. So you can just kind of take any kind of arbitrary array of the same length and use that to form groups on your data as well. Okay. Other functions we have. You can call size. We'll tell you how many of each kind of grouping there is. So there's 2 for A1, and then there's just 1 for A2, B1, and B2, so on and so forth. Okay. When you do a group by internally, so remember Python being lazy, okay? You get this group by object, okay? And internally, the group by object is iterable. You can kind of iterate over the things in the groups, and so you can incorporate it, say, into a loop. So if I say take this data, group by key 1, okay? What it's going to do is it's going to internally look at key 1, and it's going to say I see 2 unique values, A and B, and then and it's going to create these key value pairs, okay, like a dictionary. So the first name will be A, and the group will be all of the rows that correspond to A. And then the second iteration, the name will be B, and the group will be all the rows that correspond to B, right? So here I'm going to just print the name, print some dashes, and then we'll print out the group itself, okay? And then we'll ask for the mean of data 1 and the mean of data 2. And then this is just to illustrate what's happening internally when you call group by, right? So when you call group by, first you're going to get the name A, and then the corresponding data, okay, it's basically subset the data just down to the rows that have key 1 as A. And so you can see, when we ask for this thing and ask for data.1 mean, we'll get, the mean of 5, 11, and 9. And then when we ask for the mean of data 2, we'll get 11, 5, and 16. So you can see how these things internally get calculated. Okay. Similarly, when at the next iteration, the name is now B, and then the group that gets unpacked there is going to be just the rows that correspond with B. Okay, and we can say, hey, what's the mean of data 1 and mean of data 2, and we have that. So that's internally what's happening is as it's iterating over this. Okay, again, Python being lazy, it's not going to evaluate this right away. But when it has to, it will. When you say, hey, I want the mean of all of these things, it'll say, okay, I'll do it. But internally what it's doing is it's just basically filtering the data set down to the corresponding rows. Okay. Similarly, I can group by key 2, and we'll get similar kinds of results and output there. Okay, that is group by in pandas, and it's going to be very handy and very useful. The next homework, so I think right now your homework's all like NumPy and stuff. I guess I'll post another homework that will deal a little bit more with pandas, and will force you to do some grouping there. Okay, we'll wrap things up here, and let me go ahead and give you your last view quiz answer.